control over this, and it's the legislature. But you know, I'm aware that 8 of the 14 members of that board that you report to are beneficiaries of the system: 2 fire, 2 police, 2 teachers, and I think 2 other employees. So you've got a majority that are beneficiaries. That to me is a little bit like the you know, the fox watching the chicken coop. I fully, you know, you have no control. That's the legislation that determines that. There was legislation this past session. It didn't go anywhere. Is there anything that you could say for the taxpayers out there watching that would kind of make me or them feel better that the fox isn't in control of the
Sure, that's a question that is often brought up. I will tell you, if you were to look at the board structures of all the public pension plans across the country, you are going to get as many different structures as there are plans. It is not uncommon for a plan to have a board composition similar to ours. One of the comments I would make to temper the types of concerns that you raise are the retirement system is a trust. We're a fiduciary. We are the plan administrator of the plan that is sponsored by the state of New Hampshire and that all the various employers participate in. The legislature creates the benefit structure, if you will. We administer it. Our primary fiduciary duty is to make sure, and this is where the pain comes in sometimes, our job is to make sure that the right amount of money gets into the fund to pay the benefits for the benefit of all of the members of the fund. So because of the trustee relationship, the members on the board that are beneficiaries, if you will, are not on the board to create the benefit design. We fairly actively stay out of those conversations. Our job, when the legislature considers some of the bills that were proposed this year, the retirement age and others like that, our job in that circumstance is to provide information, to provide data, but not to weigh in on we think it's good or bad. That is the job of the plan sponsor and the groups that are participating in the plan. So, you know, I guess all of that's a long way to say that I think there is a sort of an arm's length relationship that I should temper your concerns along those lines.
One final question. I don't want to dominate the whole thing. Several years ago, there was a policy, I don't know if it's still in place or not, whereby if the investment return exceeded the target, for example, 8.5% today, then the incremental amount over the target, let's just assume that the return turned out to be 10.5% as opposed to the 8 that was projected, then the amount over the target was used to increase the benefits to the beneficiary. Was that a decision that was a function of the legislature, or was that a decision that was a function of the Board of Trustees?
Yeah, any design function like that is a legislatively created function. That particular provision has been amended such that there will be no gain sharing until that point in time where the fund is at least 85% funded.
So that's gone away for the time being.
So yeah, it's, you know, I'd like to have that problem. I'd like to be having that conversation because that means we'd be making up some ground. But you know, that issue is down the road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Mr. Bateman.
Today's Concord Monitor had an article, and they, in their writing, went back to the woes beginning in 1991 for the retirement system. Their quote is, when the state lawmakers adopted an unorthodox accounting method. You're only there 6 months. I don't want to have you take the responsibility of everything since 1991.
I'm happy to.
But I assume we're still using the unorthodox accounting method in some manner?
No, we're not. That is actually one of the changes that was adopted 2 years ago now. The actuarial, and it's not an accounting method, it's an actuarial method that they're referring to there. The actuarial methodology that we use today is a commonly accepted actuarial methodology, and I would offer that, you know, people who will look back and compare our funding ratios over time, because we switched from what was called the open group aggregate, which was the questionable method, to the entry age normal, which is the more common method, in 2007. You're really comparing apples and oranges when you look at the funding ratios, you know, over time. You know, there was clearly a drop. We have not, and did not, I believe, at the time that we were going through the change, sort of go back and recompute what the funding ratio would have been if we had used this, you know, the methodology that we're using now over that entire period of time. But I think if we were to do that, and it'd be awfully expensive to do that, we would find that the funding ratios that were presented historically were probably overstating where we would have been had we used the method we're using today.
The retirement system basically is a three-shot deal, a three-bucket deal. Employer puts in, employee puts in, state puts in. That varies in amounts according to the different professions, based pretty much on longevity of how long you're able to physically and mentally function at 100% to do that kind of job. In the past, there were many years in which the employers, the towns, the cities, were actually paying in less than Social Security and saving a fortune. But they never sought to correct that or see the downfall of that coming at any point.
No, and we're paying the piper for that, you know, today.
So is this again a thing of, well, my understanding is about 5 plans came in 1991 that they looked at, and in the end they just took the cheapest one?
Well, I can't speak to that, but I think for those of us, I was in this business in another iteration, if you will, back then. 1991 was a difficult time, you know, financially. I think we can remember, you know, real estate was in the dumper and everything else, and I think if I was to transport myself back in time and pretend that I was sitting in the room of the legislative committees that were doing this work at the time, I think what they were looking at was, we've hit a rough patch. There's some substantial impact that could be coming in the terms of rates. You know, let's adopt this method for a year or two to smooth, you know, the rates. And, you know, nobody ever went back and made the case to change it once the difficult years were over. The methodology worked great while the market was going up, and I think we can all remember the market was doing fabulous in the 1990s. A lot of people made a lot of money that necessarily didn't deserve
Until 9/11 of
because they woke up and money flew through the door. It's just the way the things were. The tech bubble burst, 9/11 came, and, you know, that's when the rubber really began to meet the road, at least in this system, in terms of, you know, looking out at you know, increasing rates for a number of years. And that's what really started the process that ended up with the House Bill 876 commission of a couple of years ago, and some of the other legislative changes that have occurred recently to improve the actuarial methodology and some other things to put us on a sounder long-term footing.
From the same article, if